Our speaker this afternoon is Ann Merchant, and she's the Deputy Executive Director for Communications for the National Academy of Sciences. And she's going to discuss the Science and Entertainment Exchange. And if you're wondering why I'm doing the introduction, it's because that's where I volunteer now. The Exchange is a program that for the National Academy of Sciences that connects the entertainment industry or entertainment industry professionals with top scientists and engineers to create a synergy between accurate science and engaging storylines for both film and TV programming. From a quick fact check to a special briefing, the Exchange provides quick and easy access to experts from all the scientific disciplines. The goal of the Exchange is to use the vehicle of popular entertainment media to deliver sometimes subtle but nevertheless powerful messages about science. And with that said, I introduce Ann Merchant, who is my new boss.
Oftentimes when I give this talk, and it's interesting doing it in this building because I usually have to explain what the National Academy of Sciences is because we're often confused with the National Science Foundation. In fact, I've had people come up to me and say, oh, don't worry, I know exactly what the National Academy of Sciences is. I got a grant from you guys. And then I know. They have no idea who we are because we are the takers of money, not the givers of money. That's for sure. We were created by Abraham Lincoln. Our website says, in the travail of the Civil War. It was in 1863 that the academies was created primarily to provide evidence-based advice to policymakers to create good policy in science and eventually in medicine, health, and engineering. And we still sit in that temple of science, which is about to reopen this April for the National Academy of Sciences annual meeting. It's been closed for a couple of years for renovation. Mostly what we do, and our affiliated institutions are the National Academy of Engineering and the Institute of Medicine, the National Research Council is the operating arm of that institution. The academies are essentially honorific membership societies. The fact that we do these big reports, and we do this in a balanced, non-partisan, non-advocacy kind of way, which I always find a little disingenuous. Our reports clearly have what we refer to as recommendations, and I'm not sure what a recommendation is if it isn't advocating a particular course of action. But we do say we don't advocate, and we are nonpartisan. The audiences that we usually speak to we euphemistically refer to them as policymakers and decision makers. They're the people inside the Beltway who largely are dependent on the academies to provide the evidence for them to go and create good policy. This is how most people know us. These big tomes, the things that are up on our website, we publish probably about 200 of these tomes every year. They're big policy documents, and that's what most people think of when they think of us. But the institution also realizes that it has a responsibility to communicate more broadly, that in today's environment, simply speaking to policymakers is not enough. We have seen that this is not always effective and that science has suffered as a result of it. So Ralph Cicerone, president of the National Academy of Sciences, came in and said, we need to do more than just produce those big reports. We need to think about how we could communicate with new and non-traditional audiences. So we were given a mandate to take little baby steps to do that because we're not necessarily good at speaking in a grassroots kind of environment. It's not what we do, and it's not where we're comfortable. So we decided that we would go off to Hollywood. Now, for many people, Hollywood and science, it's apples and oranges. Doesn't really make a lot of sense for people. I prefer to think of it as chocolate and peanut butter, two great tastes that taste great together. And our two great tastes were Ralph Cicerone, who is pictured on the right, and Janet and Jerry Zucker, the Hollywood producer-director couple. Most people know Jerry for his does movies like Airplane. He also did the film Ghost, which wasn't very science-based. We do point that out to him on a regular basis, that, ghosts are not something we're so into. But they had a reason to be interested in science. They were involved in getting stem cell legislation passed in the state of California. Their daughter has juvenile diabetes. And Jerry and Janet, when they tell this story, they were really desperate to get medical care for her. She was in horrible shape. And they took her to a hospital, had been through lots of tests. And she said, the first time she got a shot of insulin, they said, all of a sudden we had our daughter back, that we realized what medical science can do. But we also realized how medical science is being impeded by people that do not allow certain types of research to go forward. So they created a foundation with Doug and Lucy Wick, who are another Hollywood couple whose child also has juvenile diabetes, and got stem cell legislation passed in California. Put a lot of time and money and effort into this. So when Ralph came to town and talked to them about how we might create that synergy between Hollywood and the science community, they were really interested and very receptive to working with us. But they told us, listen, if you're going to come to Hollywood, you need to have a coming out party. You just can't come here because this is this is not a brand new idea. The idea of going to Hollywood and working with the people who are great communicators to get a message out, this is not brand new. Others have certainly done it. They haven't done it all that well. And so they said, well, what they've been missing is a party. And so we had a party. And I gotta tell you, we started planning this in late 2007. It took us a year to really put together, and it almost killed me. I think it was one of the most difficult things I've ever done in my professional life. And part of it was that the way that Hollywood works is very different from the way science works. First of all, putting this together a year in advance would just seem crazy to those Hollywood people. You should do this with 2 weeks' notice. And so there was a lot of tension going into this because it was really difficult. But we brought 18 scientists together. You'll see that's Seth MacFarlane up on the right-hand corner there, or I guess it's your left. Jerry is there with Ralph and Janet in the bottom. And you can't tell, that's Valerie Plame. Later, Jerry and Janet made Fair Game. That was their movie. So they were very excited to bring Valerie Plame. They couldn't understand why we weren't so excited. We didn't really see what she had to do with science, but they were very excited because she had a big name. So we had, and you'll see that's Bonnie Bassler down in the picture on the right, Stephen Chu and Neil Tyson. And we had 6 plenary scientists speaking to a group of about 350 assembled Hollywood people. Introducing the notion of science, bringing this concept of how we could actually make friends and influence people in Hollywood with the right kinds of scientists. We had focused on 6 science disciplines, and we were really nervous they wouldn't stay, that those 350 people, what we were told repeatedly is, well, they'll accept your invitation, and then they won't show up. If they do show up, listen, they pay people to sit in someone's seat at the Oscars because they don't even stay in the seat there. All the actions in the ladies' room and in the lobby. So we were terrified that we would put on this big event and nobody would come and nobody would stay. And as it turns out, it was a very, really wonderful. And being a Hollywood convert now, I have more videos. I'm going to show you a little bit about the event.
Entertainment has an enormous amount to do with what excites the next generation of kids. I mean, are they going to go on to be rock stars or rappers, or are they going to go on to be people who propel us out of the solar system? And I think it's very important that we not undervalue the necessity of it being the latter.
We thought, why not create a wonderful synergy and allow these 2 groups to have an ongoing dialogue with each other, which would be great creatively for both sides and hopefully be of real benefit to science.
When people in the entertainment industry have any questions or any ideas that they want to test on somebody who's maybe a specialist in the area, they can call this kind of 1-800-SCIENTIST number and be put in touch with the top experts from all around the country.
We want writers and directors to feel comfortable and to know exploring science will only open up the number of creative possibilities for their storytelling.
When I was asked to moderate a panel with Dr. deGrasse Tyson and Dr. Hamill. It really felt like I had been asked to play pickup ball with the Lakers or something. It's an extraordinary opportunity, but a humbling one as well.
The greatest piece of knowledge we have today, brought to you by modern astrophysics, is that not only are we in this universe, all these ingredients were forged in the cores of stars spread across the galaxy. Not only are we in this universe, the universe is in us.
Creativity is the measure of excellence in both fields. What have you done that's really new, that is game-changing, that actually sets a new trend?
We have thousands of robots right now in Iraq and Afghanistan used to combat IEDs. The Department of Defense is planning on introducing tens of thousands of robots into the regular infantry over the next few years. So we're seeing the roboticization of our military happen.
When a scientist comes up with a theory that could be the defining moment of his career, oftentimes what he or she will do is say, all right, how do I prove that this is absolute bullshit? Because even if they're wrong about the theory, they've still helped to push the frontier of science forward.
We're all creative and interested in discovery and interested in newness and sort of taking from the morass of stuff, and finding the nub of an interesting story. I mean, that's what we do all day long. We do experiments, we get data, but in the end we make a story.
Hollywood had a tremendous influence on me. It's always certain people whose lectures I went to, certain individuals I met, and third, even more important, certain movies I saw.
So we expect in the near future this new field, this ability to write the genetic code, is going to transform everything that we do on this planet and changes the view of life and how we might have a chance of surviving going forward.
It's great to think that there's going to be a whole new band, a whole new swath of things for stories to be about. I think all of that together is going to make this amazing project of the NAS entirely worthwhile, and I cannot wait to see it catch fire.
That last guy that you saw, he's the guy that did all the technology for Minority Report. He runs, John Koffler now runs Oblong Industries, but all that stuff you saw in Minority Report was based on the science that he introduced Steven Spielberg to. So certainly there's a long and very successful connection between science and Hollywood. Our program is run, we do have people in situ in Los Angeles. Marty Peralt and Rick Lovard actually work in Los Angeles. They have offices on the campus of UCLA. And I'm the one that goes back and forth on that airplane with way too big of a carbon footprint, managing the program out of our Washington, D.C. office. The Exchange is one of the communications programs in my portfolio, so it's not a full-time job for me, but I spend a lot of time going back and forth between L.A. and Washington, D.C. Marty is an engineer by background. Rick is a writer, so we have representation from both communities in our office. Rick was in the writer's room at Friday Night Lights for quite some time. He also was on a desk at CAA, the Creative Artists Agency. So we have bona fides from both the science and the Hollywood community represented in our office. As Ralph said, we do like to call it's 1-800-I-NEED-A-SCIENTIST. And at its simplest, that's what this is. We are a consultation opportunity for Hollywood. They call with a question, and we find somebody to provide the answer. And that really is the bread and butter, the meat and potatoes of this program. That's what we do on a regular daily basis. And we try to make this as simple and as easy as possible so that no one has to think about where they would go, what they would do. They come to us with questions. They don't have to tell us what kind of scientist they want. They just give us a question and we figure out the details. Oftentimes they don't even know exactly what their questions are going to lead to. Oftentimes we find that, from their point of view, a PhD simply means that you're a polymath. You can answer a question about structural engineering and you can answer a question about the biological mechanism of evolution. It's all the same to them because you've got a PhD. And so it's sometimes our job to parse through the questions and figure out what the different disciplines are actually represented in those questions. I tell people all the time that we are not the accuracy police, and what we have to really make that clear, not just to Hollywood, but to the science consultants whom we use. It doesn't do any good to go there and tell them all the ways they get it wrong. It's really not about pointing out their errors. It's about making them a better offer. If they have a really stupid idea, telling them it's a really stupid idea isn't going to get you anywhere. it's kind of like the same rules of improv. Improv, the rule is it's never no, but it's always yes, and. And so we say, yeah, that's an interesting idea. And you know what else you could do? And then the scientist has a conversation where Hollywood really is going to listen and pay attention. Eugenie Scott, who is, she's been one of the leaders in evolution education, was listening to a talk by Randy Olson. I don't know if you've heard of Randy. Randy is a filmmaker. Originally, he's a marine biologist from Harvard turned filmmaker. And Randy, he wrote the book, Don't Be Such a Scientist. I don't know if you've heard of that, but he essentially tells people all the time, speak from your heart and your gut, and sometimes lower down, as he points out. But you should not just be speaking from your head. And you can't expect these movie people to speak from their head. The movie business is all about speaking from your heart and your gut and lower down. You're not supposed to just speak from your head. And the goal is not to turn all these movies into documentaries, because then it's not a movie and it's not a fun TV show. We know that story will always take a backseat to the science. But what we try to get the point across is that the story is improved by science. And if we can demonstrate a way to improve the story, then Hollywood is right there with us and they want to hear us. Telling them that it's wrong isn't going to get them anywhere, but telling them a better offer is obviously the way they're going to listen. We've done a lot of big movie consults, big box office stuff. We worked on Iron Man, Iron Man 2. I got to put on the Iron Man helmet. And I tell you, Robert Downey Jr. must have a really tiny head because I could barely get that on. We have a rapid response team for the television show Fringe. TV works really quickly. Now, obviously, if you've watched Fringe, that's probably why you're laughing. There's some weird science in there. And J.J. Abrams, we tried very hard to talk to J.J. about coming onto our advisory board. He's good friends with Janet. And he said, no, these scientists are going to squelch my creativity. What he doesn't know is that his writers are calling us all the time because we're helping their creativity. And people have actually said the science has gotten better. I'd like to think it's our scientists that are responsible for that. We had a lot to do. We actually got our first screen credit in Tron Legacy. Now, you had to wait until the very end when the caterer stuff was going by, but we were in there. And we did a lot of stuff with Tron. A lot of the dialogue came from our scientists. Lied to Me is no longer on the air, but we used to help them a lot with the science dialogue that they did. Sometimes a show like The Good Wife, you don't think of science as being in there, but we've helped them with a lot of the science. They've had expert witnesses that have to testify in their court scenes, and we've helped them with those things. The Green Lantern, we helped with that. Battleship. Now, this is a new movie that Peter Berg is doing, and I guess he's just blowing up a lot of stuff as he usually does. And they've had some troubles getting it started, but we gave them several scientists to help them. We do also help places like National Geographic TV and the Discovery Channel. It's not just about the big Hollywood things. They oftentimes have access to people and don't necessarily need us, but Nat Geo calls me fairly often. Actually, what they're usually asking me for is a new host for a television program who's a scientist, but their requirements are he has to be between 5'10 and 5'11. He has to have brown hair, blue eyes. I mean, it's very strange the way Hollywood actually casts these things. So we have not been able to help them often in that particular circumstance. We usually can't talk very much about what we're doing. We're usually under the protection of a non-disclosure agreement because all this stuff is very hush-hush. There was really a big scandal in Hollywood when there were 2 insect movies at the same time. And so the last thing we want to do is be responsible for letting out a big secret, a big science secret that we're not supposed to talk about. We do about 3 to 5 new consults every week. We had visions of having to advertise in the trades or put up, signs on Hollywood Boulevard called the Science and Entertainment Exchange. We've never had to do that. From the day that we had our coming out party at the end of 2008, the phones have rung steadily. There is often not enough time in the day to handle all the questions that we get on a regular basis. One of our big success stories was on Watchmen. And it's funny, my boss showed the trailer at a governing board meeting for the Academy introducing this program and felt like, I think if they'd had Rotten Tomatoes to throw at her, they would have. And she called me on Saturday. I'm at Whole Foods. She's like, oh my God, they hate the program. They're yelling at me. They're telling me it's stupid. And I kept saying to her, but they're not the audience. The governing board of the National Academy of Sciences is not the audience for Watchmen. We are trying to reach a whole different group of people with the science in Watchmen. And what we got a guy by the name of Jim Kekela Berlioz, whom I had met at AAAS many years before, and he wrote a book, The Physics of Superheroes, and I put him together with the filmmakers from Watchmen, and they loved him. They were like, that guy, he knows every bit of this book. In fact, I was on the call, and the filmmakers were saying something about, well, you know, what we were thinking when Dr. Manhattan does such and such, and Jim said, no, you had this wrong. That was after his first girlfriend. It was when his second girlfriend, and you could tell these guys were amazed. This was a scientist who knew the science, but he knew Watchmen. He knew the whole mythology, and he could talk to them about that. He created a YouTube video where he said, I gave them the ice cream sundae when I consulted on Watchmen, but now they're going to get the broccoli. And he created a YouTube video about the science of Watchmen. Well, every time I see him give this talk, the number goes up. The first time it was 150,000 people have downloaded my video. Then it was 500,000 people have downloaded my video. He's up over 2 million downloads. And he said, I could teach for 150 years, and I would never reach that many people with the science that I try to get across to my students. So this is a way that science consultants can turn this into more than just, hey, I got to hang out on the set. They can really do something important and something good if they parlay this opportunity into more than just the cool factor. People always ask about our funding. We are funded by the National Academy of Sciences through our endowment and through private donations from foundations for the most part. The Sloan Foundation has supported us, the Moore Foundation, Research Corporation of America, the California Endowment. But no money changes hands. These consultants who do this, people like Jim, they don't get paid. They do this free. The Academy, Melissa, as she pointed out, is a volunteer. The Academy has thrived on the spirit of volunteerism for 150 years, and these consultants are no different. We pay to travel them in. We feed them when they come and they do these consults, but they don't get paid, and the studios pay nothing. The honest truth is that if the studios had to pay, they probably would just say, we'll get it wrong. The only way this works is by making this free. We do a lot of events. We do regular events. The big coming out party was just the beginning, because we found that they will come and they will stay. And we do some of them. This is in Janet and Jerry Zucker's home, and that's Neil Shubin talking about evolution. And actually the foot there, that is Sean Carroll, the biologist, not the physicist, talking about evolution with him. And you can see that that room had probably 50 or 60 people in it. That's Seth MacFarlane. He was the host that evening at Janet and Jerry's house. And, he has a big interest in science, so he does a lot of different events for us. They're casual. The idea is that these people are supposed to feel like, I've had a glass of wine with Neil Shubin. It influences them in a lot of ways, not just about the science. We're giving them inspiration, but the next time they write a science character into their script, it's not going to be the person who has Asperger's that can't speak an entire sentence and their pants are too short and their glasses are broken. It's going to be a Neil Shubin, who's a cool guy, who's a paleontologist who discovered Tiktaalik and really is a fun person and a really interesting person. So these are just meant to be, very casual. This is at the head of the table, you can see I brought in a very cool-looking guy. He's a hacker. His name is Pablos Holman, and that's at CAA, Creative Artists Agency. It's called a Table Talk. And Pablos now has a producer credit on a film. He also has been the inspiration for several hacker characters that have been written since that time. We do film screenings. This is actually at the E Street Theater in D.C. because we do some of our screenings in D.C. We bring panels of people to talk. John Amiel is in the center there. He made the movie Creation. John is also famous for having made the movie The Core, one of the movies that is roundly despised by scientists. But John says, my shoulders are broad, my back is strong, bring it on. And he knows that Hilary Swank doesn't really seem like a geophysicist, but that's okay. He made Creation, and that was a good thing. We find science anywhere. That's George Romero, and we brought him in with his new zombie film, and the two people to his left, it's Robert Smith in the blue T-shirt. He is an epidemiologist, and he talks about the spread of zombieism as a way to explain the epidemiological modeling of disease, the spread of disease. And beside him is Stephen Schlossman, who is a a psychologist at Harvard who uses the zombie brain to talk about the normal human brain. So we find science in almost anything. In the center there is May Berenbaum. She is a member of the National Academy of Sciences, and she was there talking. That's Wilmer Valderrama. You may recognize him from that 70s show. He's totally into insects. So we had May come out and give a talk about insects with Wilmer Valderrama. We did something new recently. It's something that I'd wanted to put together for a while. It's called Inside the Writer's Room. We took the writers from Covert Affairs and brought them to ESRI. They are the biggest geospatial information science services in the world. And I don't know how many of you have seen Covert Affairs, but they use a lot of GIS stuff in that room. And I kept thinking, this is who we should bring together with the ESRI people. And we went to Dave Bardis, whom we know, and we convinced him. He brought his entire writer's room. They took a whole day off from writing and spent a full day at ESRI being wowed by all the science. And now Augie is going to be doing some serious GIS because they were very excited by all of this. They say everyone came into work today jazzed and excited. They were so excited to have their pictures taken with the scientists. It was great because that's the thing that initially we thought, well, we know that the Hollywood people, they worry that, maybe I'm not smart enough to hang out with all those smart science people. And the science people have this sort of, well, am I quite cool enough to hang out with all those Hollywood people? The fact is that the scientists are plenty cool and the Hollywood people are incredibly smart. And so they really have a great time when you put them together. And they really feel like they've both met rock stars, which is the best possible outcome. We've also spent a lot of time working on our website. Sloan gave us a nice grant so that we could really improve this. There are a lot of feature stories out there about scientists that we work with and with the Hollywood people. So it's a really nice place to kind of figure out what's going on with the exchange on a regular basis. But it's kind of become a fan site for people. It's fun. People often ask us, so what is really the point of this? And does this really make a difference? Now, we have asked for funding from Sloan to do some evaluation. Obviously, people, they go to movies, and whether you want them to or not, they do learn something. And I can't tell you how many people after I give these talks will come up to me, particularly teachers. I was speaking to an Einstein fellow last weekend after a talk that I gave, and he said, after the movie Free Willy, I had so many kids coming into my class saying, I want to do that thing where I work with the whales. That's what I want to be. I want to be that person that works with whales. So you would like to be a marine biologist. I don't know what it is, but that's the thing I want to do. And we have another, she's a woman, she was the science advisor for the X-Files for a long time. And she runs the turnip crinkle virus lab at the University of Maryland, Ann Simon. And she said, how many people came in? She said, almost all these young women would come into my class and say, Dana Scully inspired me to be a scientist. She was the rational one. She was the smart one. I want to be that person. And so people pick up these vibes. They learn something whether you want them to or not. So if you can make sure that it's quality entertainment, then you can make sure they learn something good. It is a form, as there's there are papers out there on this. It is an accidental curriculum. And it makes a difference whether that curriculum is good. The Moore Foundation found out about what we were doing. They were very excited about the fact that this could actually be used in an educational setting. So we brought together a group of people. They gave us $50,000. This was at Janet and Jerry's home. And they said, we'd like you to sit and think about how you could use $50,000 to do something with the Science and Entertainment Exchange. Well, at the end of the day, that $50,000 that they gave us, and this never happens, became $500,000. Because the Hollywood people that we had sitting there saying, well, I guess you could have people sit around and talk about what you could do with entertainment and science, but that's boring. What you should do, and of course, Hollywood being Hollywood, they had huge ideas. And we're saying to Vicki, you can't do this stuff for $50,000. And she said, just let them roll with it. By the end of the day, they'd added money to our pot. So we did, and you can see that's that same picture, but there's my boss, and she's sitting there saying, holy shit, what are we going to do with this money? She was actually very nervous about this. And what we did was the Summit on Science, Entertainment, and Education, which was a full-day event in Hollywood. That's Neil Tyson clustered around because it really was a day about teachers and students and education. And not just playing clips in your classroom and then sitting down and saying, so what did we see in there? Let's talk about that. We were looking at ways to really integrate education and entertainment. And Neil Tyson was I don't know how many of you know or have met or seen Neil talk. He's an incredibly charismatic person. But these kids were so excited to meet him. We made a full day out of it. We had a standing room only crowd. We had more than 200 people at the Paley Center in Los Angeles. And yes, we had some of our standard cast of character. That's Chuck Vest and Ralph Cicerone, who opened the day and talked about where we could find opportunities to put these people together. This is Sean Carroll, the biologist, talking about how Indiana Jones inspired him to want to do what he does. This is Will Wright, the game developer, because another big part of entertainment is video games. And so we also work on video games. We brought in this, again, this is not a typical academy kind of meeting. We brought in a graphic facilitator who was up on the stage and writing down and making pictures out of everything people were saying. That's Jerry Zucker. In the center is a Disney Planet Challenge award-winning teacher, and that's Miles O'Brien facilitating a conversation among them. And I think that Brian Green was on the other side of Miles. And the day really was about teachers and students. This is Janet English, an presidential award-winning teacher, and her students. And she told me, I will bring my students, I'll put them on the bus, but they're not my high-functioning students. They're not my best students. They're not my A students. And we said, that's exactly who we want. We want your regular students, kids that need to get excited in a different way. And they had the best time. They were up on our stage. They were part of the day. They were giving talks and presentations. These are two Def Jam poets. I thought Ralph Cicerone was going to fall out of his chair. He's sitting in the front. And afterwards I said, well, did you like that, Ralph? It was very interesting, Anne. Very interesting. But they had people in tears between laughing and crying, I think, most of the day. Steve Connell and Sekou Andrews were the Def Jam poets we had come in. We made sure that people had a chance to talk, that it wasn't just about sitting and listening. They were out there interacting and having a chance to meet one another. We flew in 50 teachers from around the country, paid for them to come in so that they could do this. Neil Tyson and others were off in small groups facilitating. This is Tom Shadyac is mostly responsible for some of the bawdiest, raunchiest comedies in Hollywood, but he's famous for having fallen off his bicycle and almost killed himself and discovered a whole new meaning to life. So now Tom is not just, he was also, I think, the youngest writer for Bob Hope. So he has a long string of credentials to his name in Hollywood, and now he's trying to save the world. So we got Tom to come and speak at the end. And believe it or not, he was a little different, but Vicki Chandler from the Moore Foundation was actually in tears at his talk. So it was really great to end the day with him. Actually, we didn't end with him. We ended with the Backbeats. Again, not a typical National Academy of Sciences meeting. They were the group that won Sing Off on ABC, and we got them to come in and do their Sing Off. So it really was a day where people got together and they interacted with one another. They stayed all day. They were there from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening. And that, at the end of the day, is what this program is about. It's really about engaging people. It's making sure that people want to do this, not just that we invite them so they come and they sort of see what's going on. People were excited at the end of this day. That's Jeff Silver. It's my last slide. That's Jeff Silver. He is the producer of Tron. He is he has won an Oscar. I mean, this is a big time producer. These kids, at the end of the day, they asked him if they could take his badge home because it would be so special to them. He walked away from that and said, I have never been so inspired in my life to see how we in Hollywood could actually make a difference in the classroom. So part of what we did with that $500,000 from the Moore Foundation, after this day, with all that inspiration, we said, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. And we awarded $500,000. Actually, I think there is one more slide. But we had 37 proposals come in. We asked people for ideas of how they would spend. We spent $250,000 on the event, and we had another $250,000 left over, and we gave that to Game Dusk. And Game Dusk is creating an immersive video game opportunity for kids to learn about geosciences and other forms of science by actually doing it, feeling it, going down in the Earth's crust, actually seeing what it feels like to touch those surfaces and see what it looks like. And so we have really found that this program is more than just the consults. Even though that's our daily bread and butter, it really is about the cultural exchange and the bringing together of communities who are committed to finding ways that they can do good together. And so that's why I fly back and forth between D.C. and Los Angeles and don't mind the jet lag, because it really does feel like it's for a good reason. So thank you. And I guess I'm supposed to take questions now, or you're supposed to be moderating and being the tough guy question person, right? Okay, all right, well. Okay, all right.
I had a couple of questions. One is you're interacting with the film industry. What about literature? Science fiction writers and so forth maybe could use some help in that regard as well. NASA has something going with Tor books. I was wondering if you were familiar with that. And then my second question was a little more in line with the National Capital Area Skeptics, and that is, of course, there's lots of fictional use of paranormal themes and so on, and that's perfectly okay if it's fiction. But I'm just wondering, how do you think your guys might interact with them? Where, oh yes, we have somebody that told us about Dr. Rhine's work with ESP and put the best spin on it in a way I think most skeptics might disagree with. You get the idea, I hope.
Yeah, and to answer your first question, yes, we have worked with some novelists. We had to kind of make a decision of where our focus would be, and we really decided that we would pay most attention to film, television, and to video games. It's not that we won't help, it's just we had to narrow our focus to be able to keep the program manageable. There's only 2 people in a one-person office in Los Angeles doing this, so it really was about time management as much as anything else. We're not averse to talking to science fiction novelists. It's not where we've put our emphasis. As to the second question, there have been times where we've actually turned down consults, where we've been asked to consult on things like paranormal activity, where we worry that by becoming involved, it somehow lends legitimacy to something that has no legitimacy. So there are places where we have said we're not the right people to ask. In fact, I just got a call the other day from somebody, and I've said, based on the filmmaker that was involved, and I know some of the films he's made in the past have been very anti-science, I said, I'm not really sure this is right for us. So if we think that something really is not going to benefit from science, if they're going to use science in a way that we're going to feel used and abused, we say no thanks.
Earlier you were showing a film at the E Street Theater. Mm-hmm. Is this something that would have been open to the public?
Yes.
And how would the public find out about those types of showings?
They are very much open to the public. We are, of course, constrained by the number of seats at the E Street Theater, and we always take their biggest theater, which is about 250 seats. We generally send out to the list of people that come to what there's a DASER events. I'm trying to remember what that acronym means. It's an Academy-sponsored program through the cultural programs of the National Academy of Sciences. So that's how we usually send out our invitations. But we also publicly post things on the Academy's website, and we will send them out. Sometimes we send them to NSF, NSTA, places like that. So we do let people know in a variety of ways. I mean, I think Melissa could probably make sure that our announcements got on your mailing list as well. And we do them. We just did Losing Control in the fall, and we're looking. I think it's called Ice Chasers. We've just been contacted by somebody. It's screened at Sundance, and we're looking. It's a documentary, but it looks really interesting. So we were looking at screening that.
Yes. There's kind of a film industry in Chicago and New York and Orlando and so forth that deals with documentaries, which are pseudo-documentaries often, and are often sold to the public school systems, and also some of the major films that have been box office hits have not been Hollywood films. I'm thinking of, there's a couple dozen. The Blair Witch Project comes to mind. If one of those guys called you, would they get support, or are you driven by, since you don't charge, are you driven by a proposal or a request for help, or what drives it?
Well, when you say if they called us just asking for science help?
If somebody called 1-800-I-NEED-A-SCIENTIST and said, I'd like to email you a script to look at.
You know, as I said before, we are selective. We're careful about where we put our scientists and who we put them in touch with. So we go through a vetting process. We'll oftentimes ask, most often the filmmakers that come to us are pretty well-known people. Kenneth Branagh consulted us on Thor. I never knew there was science in Norse gods, but then when I saw the movie, I realized, and I have to tell you that the interesting thing about that consult was that Sean Carroll, the physicist, was one of the science consultants whom we connected. The reason that Natalie Portman's character is an astrophysicist is because Sean said, I know she's supposed to be a nurse, but hey, couldn't she be an astrophysicist? And he had proposed things to them. They were disrupting all the laws of gravity, which did not make a physicist very happy, as you might imagine. And so Sean had said, well, yeah, that looks really great. Well, what you could do maybe is have a black hole. Black holes are boring. And so he said, well, there's this thing called the Einstein-Rosen bridge. What's that? We love it. So if you go see that movie and it's not, as I understand it, it's not technically the exact right usage of the term Einstein-Rosen bridge, but they did pick up on it. So we usually get people like Kenneth Branagh coming to us, Jeff Silver, John Turteltaub. We don't usually get a lot of fringy requests.
If you got a fringy request,
we would say no, thank you. If it was something that did not appear to us, and when I say fringy, I don't mean a small independent filmmaker. I mean that if this looked like something that was inappropriate for us to become involved, we would say we're not the right people for you.
In these kinds of cases, do you just say no, or can you tell people where to go? Are there other people who have superficially similar sorts of things that you can give people a lead to where?
Sometimes we may say that no, we're not the right people, but exactly. For example, there's a group called Hollywood Health and Society that's run out of the Lear School of Communication at USC. And so we say, well, this is very health-focused. You probably should go to them. If we just think, somebody came to us and wanted to know how we could make sure to... I'm trying to remember exactly what their request was. It's something like, we want to make sure that the people on this reality show feel as stressed as possible. Scientifically, how could we do this? And we said... no, we cannot help. So we get things like that. We're not even sending them elsewhere. We're just saying no. Thanks for calling.
Can you give us another anecdote or example or two of what you saved the world from? Are there things that clearly have your fingerprints on it that you can divulge?
Well, I certainly think that how much we're saving the world from, even from aliens, mostly they're looking for the best ways to destroy the world. That's usually what Hollywood wants to know, because that's really what it's all about, the best explosion. We have been involved. I know that for Watchmen, there were they wanted, for example, to know, why is Dr. Manhattan blue? How do we explain this? How do we make this legitimate? And so the physicist, Jim Cacalio, said, if you accept the world in which Dr. Manhattan lives, and you have to understand that this is not the same world that we live in, but physical principles of that world being what they are would dictate that Dr. Manhattan is blue for these reasons. And so oftentimes we provide that backstory, that kind of legitimizing of how this world comes to be what it is. There are a number of times where we give them advice and it doesn't show up in the film. There have been a lot of times where we've suggested things and they've decided to go in another direction. We can never make sure that they do that the way we think it should be done. So I could tell you there are lots of times, and I'm not allowed to talk about those, where we've said you should do this, and they've chosen to do something entirely different. In the movie Contagion, we helped with some of that, and the CDC was obviously very involved as well. And I don't know how many of you saw Contagion, but the National Academy of Sciences got a shout out in that. And what I liked was that it was so important to become a member of the NCAS that they felt that scientists would be willing to kill millions of people just to be able to say that they could become a member when they solved the problem. So I thought that was pretty funny. You're welcome.